call to order. This is January 13th, 2022 special city council meeting regarding the alternative water source program. If you can call the roll, please.
Sorry, it's not on, is it? Sorry, there it is. Roll call, Mayor Odekirk?
Here.
Councilman Clement?
Here.
Councilwoman Gavin?
Here.
Councilman Guerrero?
Here.
Councilman Hug? Councilman Morris? Councilman Mudrum?
Here.
Councilwoman Coleman?
Here.
Councilwoman Reardon?
Here.
Next agenda item is citizens to be heard. We have no one signed up. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak on agenda items? Okay, seeing none.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for making the time to have this special meeting tonight. I'm very excited to be here to give an update on our alternative water source program. Again, my name is Allison Swisher. I'm the Director of Public Utilities, and I want to introduce the rest of the program team that is here tonight. Ms. Teresa O'Grady with Crawford Murphy and Tilley, one of the program managers, Mr. Joe Johnson with Stantec, the other program manager, and Ms. Barbara Adams with Donahue and Rose, who's special legal counsel for the project. So today is about 1 year since we last had a session with the council about this program. A lot has been done since the decision was made to select the city's alternative water source. And so tonight we have a number of items we want to discuss. The advancer isn't working. It was like when I tested it.
They were pressing some things on the router.
Did you get it to work out? Demand the slide.
Can advance the.
Can advance the, oh, the presentation.
Does it work now? It works now. Fantastic. Okay. Seems like whenever I kick one of these things off, something goes awry. So at least I remembered Barb's name this year. So. Okay, so again, a lot of items we want to talk about tonight. This is the agenda. I'm going to start by giving an overview and status update. And then I want to spend a lot of time focusing in on the Water Commission formation efforts, have some exciting information to present related to that. Joe Johnson then is going to give an update on the funding and financial strategy. Teresa is then going to talk about the accomplishments in 2021, and then I'll come back and just do a quick look ahead for what's coming up in 2022. So again, this is just a workshop session, so we do want it to be interactive, so please, if you have any questions at any time, stop us and we can answer those. And there's not gonna be any actions taken tonight, so again, we'll pause after each of those agenda items for any question and discussion. So again, the goals for the evening are listed here. Really want to take this opportunity to help increase awareness of program activities and progress for hopefully everyone who's watching at home. We are going to kind of start at the beginning of the program, just so in case any residents are coming to this for the first time, they understand the full picture of what's going on. We're going to really, again, focus time on the Water Commission formation and all the required council actions that are going to be needed for that. We want to seek the council's input on our future water capacity needs, and then again, highlight our accomplishments from 2021 and look ahead to 2022. So, again, why are we here? I always want to start off with a reminder of why Joliet is embarking on this significant capital improvement project. And simply put, it's because our existing water source, the deep groundwater aquifers, will not be able to reliably meet the city's water demands by 2030. This was identified by the Illinois State Water Survey through groundwater modeling that they completed in 2018 and then updated in 2020. So we do know that we have established a deadline of 2030 for when we need to implement this program. This issue is not one that is unique to Joliet. It's a regional issue. The groundwater in the region is multiple other communities also rely on the same aquifer as us. And through the modeling done by the state, we do know that if Joliet switches off the aquifer, it does not solve the problem for those other communities. And in recent years, also, we've identified that the shallow aquifer also has some issues related to water quality. There's increasing chloride levels from the salt that's applied to roads and then runs off into the water bodies and gets into that shallow aquifer. And then also recently, testing conducted by the IEPA has shown that there are PFAS at detectable levels in area wells. So with the regional issues, there is an opportunity for a regional solution. And from day one, Joliet has always considered this program to be a solution not only for Joliet, but also for the region. And that's something that the council has always been very supportive of, is trying to find a solution for the region. And we've taken the lead in identifying this solution. In 2017, Mayor Odekirk reestablished the Environmental Commission, which led the city's study of alternative water sources. That was a multi-phase study that began with a phase 1 report, which looked at all possible water alternatives for the city, and then evaluated those for water quality and quantity. That was then narrowed down to 5 alternatives that were further evaluated. In 2020, we compared 2 different Lake Michigan alternatives, purchasing water from the city of Chicago or constructing a new intake and a new pipeline from Lake Michigan through Indiana. And again, last January, the city council did select purchasing water from the city of Chicago as the alternative water source for the city. So what does that program, which we call the Alternative Water Source Program, consist of? It consists of a connection in the vicinity of the Midway Airport by Chicago Southwest Pumping Station, and then transmitting that water approximately 35 miles from that pumping station to the Joliet region. And from there, then it'll be distributed to all of our regional partners. It consists of multiple capital improvement projects, which are listed on the screen, and the estimated cost is $600 to $800 million. So guiding us through this complex program is the city's strategic plan, and we have a vision of being recognized by our customers, employees, elected officials, regulatory agencies, and regional partners as a leader in the industry. And our mission is to implement this new program and provide a safe and reliable drinking water source to the city by 2030. So we have a schedule that to do this. It's divided up into 3 main categories: preliminary design, which took place in 2021, and then final design, which will begin in 2022 and continue to 2024, with construction beginning in 2024 and taking place for approximately 6 years. So enabling us to move forward with implementation of this program is receipt of the city's Lake Michigan allocation. And this was obtained this past year. It was a major milestone for us, which enables us to use the water from the lake. And another major task in 2021 was the ongoing negotiations with the city of Chicago for the final water supply agreement. A preliminary agreement was executed between Joliet and Chicago last January. So a couple of major highlights from those negotiations this year is we have performed a comprehensive audit of Chicago's cost of service studies. And the good news is that through that cost of service study, the water rate that Chicago would charge Joliet has been reduced by about 50 to 60 cents from what we had presented last January. And also, we have a commitment from Chicago to initiate the advisory council. That was a very important component of the preliminary agreement, was that Chicago would allow for Joliet to have representation on an advisory council that would be able to provide meaningful input into the operation and of the Chicago water system. And so they have done that. They have made good on that commitment. In December, I participated in a meeting with their other 4 largest wholesale customers to kick that off. So the negotiations are ongoing, and we do anticipate that we would bring that final agreement to the Joliet City Council for approval in the second quarter of 2022. So I'll just stop at this point. That covers the first agenda item, which was the overall update and history of the program, and see if there's any questions before I dive into the next agenda item, which is the Regional Water Commission.
Mayor.
Yes.
Allison, you mentioned, I'm not saying this started with this, but there was a water study done, state of Illinois, or set by the state of Illinois back in 2018, and then redone in 2020. Was this the same study, or they were reaffirming their study, or how is that?
Yes, they were reaffirming that information. What we did in 2018 was we had provided more specific information related to Joliet's water withdrawals. And then shortly after that, there was the formation of the Southwest Water Planning Group. And so then we had more information that was provided by other communities and industries. And so with that additional information, the State Water Survey refined that model further and then confirmed that with that new information, the timeline for Joliet was still 2030.
Is there another one planned, or is there not a need for another one, or is there?
Yes, so the State Water Survey was part of a 3-year contract with the Southwest Water Planning Group, of which Joliet is a member, and they will be publishing then their final study for that this year.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as I said previously, Joliet has always considered this program to be a solution not only for Joliet, but for the entire region. And, as you can see from our updated logo, this is not just Joliet rethinking its water source and water use. It's really everyone in the region working together to rethink how we use water. And so we just have updated our branding to reflect that this is a program that encompasses many communities now. And so working together has many benefits. We've identified these previously, but the benefits of a regional water commission is lower water rates due to cost sharing and economies of scale. We're able to distribute the risk amongst more entities. There's a lot of support for this from state and federal agencies. And so we've already been able to utilize that to help obtain favorable legislation, which will hopefully enable future funding also. And lastly, then it does give us the ability to obtain access for construction and rights of way outside of the limits of Joliet. And so we have demonstrated over this past year that the more communities that participate, the greater benefit there is for all who become members of the system. And you can see from this chart that it's pretty clear that as you add additional communities, the overall cost per million gallons per day for construction of the system decreases. And so really, through this, we're able to encourage the most participation in order to recognize this lowest cost for all. Over the past year, there's been a lot of work done in order to get to this point of forming the Water Commission. We started out, I believe it was February of last year, we had a meeting, and we met with, at that time, 11 other communities who were interested in continuing discussions related to forming a water commission. And over the past year, we've been having multiple meetings. A technical advisory group has been meeting at least 2 times a month, and then there's also a mayors and managers group that has been meeting monthly. And so I thank Mayor Odekirk for all your time spent on progressing this forward, and then all the other regional partners and their staff who have spent a lot of time as well. So at this point, we have 7 communities who are still continuing with the discussions. Joliet, Lamont, Romeoville, Crest Hill, Shorewood, Minooka, and Shanahan. 4 communities did decide that they are no longer interested. Oswego, Montgomery, and Yorkville did announce in December that they would be moving forward with connecting to the DuPage Water Commission system. And then Homer Glen has decided that at this point, they'll be continuing with their current water source.
Allison, I would point out, when Oswego and Montgomery and Yorkville made that decision, their mayors reached out to me. They were very complimentary of you and of the city for what we had done. It was a financial issue, and I think that the distance between those communities and Joliet were the deciding factor. But they were very complimentary. Wanted to thank the city of Joliet for all that we did to bring this issue forward and to get them to the point where they were.
Yeah, yes. So enabling us to work together with our regional partners is this new Water Commission legislation that was unanimously approved in veto session this past fall and signed by the governor in December. And it was no small undertaking to try and get this legislation approved in what was a very shortened veto session. But with the assistance of all of our potential members advocating for this, as well as the city's advocacy team, we were able to get this done. So, what does it mean to be a member of a water commission? So we put together this little org chart to hopefully clarify what the roles will be. And so the Water Commission is its own legal entity, and the commission will purchase the water from the city of Chicago. And then that Water Commission will sell that water to all of the commission members, and Joliet will be one of those commission members. Each member will appoint an elected official to be on the Board of Commissioners, and then that Board of Commissioners will make, the important decisions about how much, what the rate will be that the Water Commission sells the water to its members for. It'll approve construction contracts, et cetera. So also important to note is for the time that the program is being designed and constructed, Joliet will act as the commission's program manager. So there will be a contract between Joliet and the commission for which the commission will hire Joliet to act in that role. And I'll talk about that in more detail on a future slide. So Joliet and each of the other potential members has a number of items to do in order to join the commission. So the overall deadline to do this for all the parties is February 28th. We are anticipating that these items will be on the Joliet City Council agenda for approval on February 1st. And so there's 5 major components to joining the Water Commission, and I'll discuss each of these on the next slides. So the preliminary agreement has been negotiated over the past year with the potential partners, and it really establishes the key terms for what will be a future intergovernmental agreement that will formally and officially create the Water Commission. That's anticipated to happen in spring of 2023, and that is delayed that year to allow for the other regional partners to get their Lake Michigan allocations. So that will be a process that they are required to submit their applications by March 30th of this year. And so then we are, very positive that, they can proceed with getting those applications approved and then getting their permits issued. And so this preliminary agreement then is in place until the time that IGA is approved next spring. There's very limited termination rights. So, once we know who signs the preliminary agreement, we anticipate that would be who would ultimately form the commission. So we are intending to post this full document of the preliminary agreement on the Rethink Water Joliet website tomorrow, so that the public can view that document if they wish. So there are a number of objectives that all the parties agreed to as we were forming the preliminary agreement. And one of the major components that was critical for Joliet was that the project be completed on time by May of 2030. It's also important that there be cost controls established. As Joliet give up some of the control over the program, we wanted to maintain that there would still be a means of controlling costs. We also wanted the agreement to encourage as much participation as possible. And as I showed before, that, encouraging participation reduced then the overall costs. We wanted to make sure that all of the costs are distributed fairly. And we also wanted to protect future capacity needs. Many of the communities in this region are growing and anticipate growth beyond 2050, but there are communities who are not. So we needed to balance that need of those who are growing between those who will be built out by that time. And so then the last principle is just that everything that was agreed to cannot be changed unless there's a unanimous approval to change it. So as Joliet, we can be confident that what we've agreed to now will be what will ultimately be the deal that is made. So the first attachment to the preliminary agreement is the key principles document. And this document defines the basis for the IGA, and it's broken up into 4 sections: governance, financing, the program/project schedule, development and management, and then operations. And then lastly, it does define Joliet's role as the program manager for the duration of the program. And so again, the commission will contract with Joliet to perform that role. And this was something very important to Joliet during these negotiations, that we remain in a position of having that control over implementation of the program, just to ensure that it would be completed on time by 2030. So in order to design the system, we have to know how big it's going to be. And so that means that we have to know each community's demands that they need the system to serve them. And that's, you design the system based on the maximum day demand needs. And so within this preliminary agreement, we have to provide a preliminary declaration. When we execute the IGA next spring, we'll do a final declaration, and that will need to be within 10% of the preliminary declaration. So we still have some room to adjust this over the next year as we gather more information. It's important to note that the way the commission is structured is that the payments for capital contributions will be distributed to members based on that capacity that they declare. And so then the system capacity that the ultimate system will be designed for will be the total of all of those individual members' maximum day demands. And right now, there's no excess capacity that is considered for the initial design up to 2050. And so it's important that we look at this and identify then what our demands will be, so that we can be able to support the future growth within Joliet. And so it's a very important decision to make, but we should keep in mind that the system is going to be designed with expansion in mind. And so when we pick our selections for 2050 and build out, the system will initially be designed for 2050, but again, we'll have the opportunity to expand in the future to that build out capacity. So this is what the program team and staff is recommending that Joliet declare for the preliminary agreement. So for the 2050 max day demand, we recommend 32 million gallons per day. This is based on the CMAP, which is Chicago Metropolitan Association for Planning population projection for 2050. That agency projects that Joliet's population will be about 203,000 people in 2050. It also does incorporate what we're calling the Southeast growth area, which was not included in CMAP's projections. And then again, it also includes a reduction in non-revenue water to 10%, and then some water conservation that we anticipate will occur as people start to use less water. For the build-out maximum day demand, we are recommending 65 MGD. This would support a population of 400,000 people. This is a 100-year projection, so it's planning to 2121. And it also assumes that the growth within the city will be consistent with the current development mix between residential, industrial, and commercial. So in developing these demands, you have to balance the need to be conservative, making sure we have enough water, with also the cost associated with it. So if we were to modify the 2050 max day demand Every MGD that we would add or subtract would change Joliet's contribution to the program by about, we're estimating $13 million per MGD. So there's, real dollars associated with making that decision. The next component of the preliminary agreement is the basis of design. This is about a 90-page engineering document which identifies the key features and design criteria for the proposed system. It is going to be attached to the preliminary agreement as Exhibit C. It's important for us that this is included because it does establish those minimum design criteria. We want to make sure that moving forward, the system is designed in a reliable fashion that meets what Joliet had initially contemplated for this system. It also establishes a baseline for design and associated infrastructure costs. So important to note is that any changes to this basis of design would require, that would increase the program costs or lengthen the program schedule, would have to be unanimously approved by all the members. Okay, so the last section of the preliminary agreement is identifying who the appointed members to the two working groups, which will serve for the commission during this interim period until the IGA is executed and the commission is formed. So what's anticipated to occur is prior to the IGA being executed, there'll be two working groups. There'll be a mayors and managers advisory working group and then a technical advisory working group. So the mayor and managers advisory working group will be handling the policy decisions, while the technical advisory working group will be working with the program team on some of the engineering, the operations, and other design type questions. After the IGA is executed, then the Board of Commissioners will be formed and the city will have a commissioner and an alternate, and then there'll be a technical advisory committee which will be made up of municipal employees. So a number of discussion items here. Want to see if there's any questions on the preliminary agreement, the key principles basic design, seek confirmation on those declarations of our max day demands, and then talk about the appointments to the advisory working group.
Mayor,
Yes.
I don't want to get ahead of you in your presentation, so I know you talked about the preliminary amount versus the 100-year amount.
Mm-hmm.
Size of pipe will be talked about later, or that is in here?
Yes, so the size of pipe is really dependent upon what the other communities identify. They'll be going through the similar process, and so once we add up all of the different communities' demands, then we will size the pipe. So currently what's anticipated for the communities that I've listed is 66-inch. That's the size of the pipe.
Which can handle 65 MGD?
Teresa did this calculation, and I believe you said it's 120.
120, it's 123 MGD at a velocity of 8 feet per second, which is the maximum velocity we've noted for the transmission main in the basis of design.
I think you might have mentioned to me that the issue would be if we are fortunate enough to get that bigger pumping stations or bigger pumps, that type of thing would be needed?
Yes, so the pipe would accommodate the build-out demand, and then what we'd have to do is the pump stations that would be constructed as part of the initial project or program to meet 2050 demand would be upgraded to the build-out capacity, and then 2 additional pump stations would have to be added in the system to pump the water through the pipe at that 8 feet per second.
But not until the demand is there.
Correct.
Could be well after my time. Since we are the biggest player in this, you're not foreseeing anybody coming up asking for more of a allotment than we have, obviously, right?
No, I think under the current scenario, Joliet would be slightly more than 50% of the commission's capacity. Teresa, is that fair?
Yeah, initially it's about, I think it's about 52%, and then for build out, it's about 60%.
Thank you.
How does this address preliminarily commercial and industrial development? Is that in the equation? Our 2050 maximum per day?
Yeah, so we assumed, again, the growth would be consistent with our current mix of development, which I believe is 65% residential and 35% commercial and industrial.
So should you have someone come in, we talk about, for instance, like, frankly, processing centers for the, computers for business related to, they have a higher demand, at least with the current technology on the cooling systems being dependent on water. What if we have a project like that that could bring in quite a bit of revenue to the city? Can we accommodate that if it's 2 or 3 million a day?
We could, like I said, the system would be designed for 2030 to provide to Joliet 32 million gallons a day. And so that, if we, say in 2030, had a large water user come in, that would just probably prompt an expansion to occur sooner. So it would just take away some of that capacity that we had anticipated would occur closer to 2040, 2045.
And we are limited at what size pipe we can put in, because if we get too large to do with pressure and movement of water, it can become to where the water.
Yes, that's correct. And I think that'll be something that'll be evaluated with the commission once we know what all the other demands are, because there might be the decision to upsize the pipe even more, just because clearly the pipe is the limiting factor for future expansion. But you'd have to evaluate what that velocity would be at the minimum water usage in 2030, because there is a minimum. You don't want to go below about 1 to 2 feet per second, because then you can start having settlement within the water, because it's going too slowly through the pipe.
Can that be addressed with more robust pumping?
Yes, because the pumping would make it go faster.
So actually, there's no limit to the size, just it would then be dependent, the
Well,
pump specs.
I'll turn to Teresa.
Yeah, so it has to do with the amount of volume you're pumping through the pipe and the inside diameter of the pipe. So what would happen is if you increase the size of the pipe and then you had the same amount of flow going through it, your velocity would be less, and you just want to keep it above that 1 foot per second, or else you can have anything that's in the water settle or get stagnant, which could affect water quality.
So with the 2050, estimates, what's considering what you're discussing as an engineer, what's the largest pipe diameter we could use, out of curiosity? Did we figure that out?
So we looked at 2030 minimum day demand, and at 2030 minimum day demand, based on some of the numbers we got from the potential regional partners in over the past year, that would be for the scenario we would be looking at with all the members right now would be about a 66-inch pipe, and that would result in a velocity between 1 to 2 feet per second.
Okay, so any questions about the preliminary agreement, the key principles for the basis of design?
Not on the preliminary, but back to Councilman Hugg's statement. So if a commercial user came in that needed a lot of water for cooling or for whatever else, we would be requiring that they recapture most of this water, wouldn't we?
Yeah, so we would, some of the larger water users who have come, who can use non-potable water, we have been just talking to them about, effluent from the city's wastewater treatment plants or other ways to not use potable water, because it would likely be more cost effective for them.
Thank you.
Well, Allison, all I can say is I'm glad we met the other day. A lot of my questions were answered, and you did a fantastic job as well as your other crew over here. Thank you.
Okay. So I guess I'm hearing no objections or discussion on the water demands. We'll proceed then with what we have recommended.
I would say just as we mentioned in our kind of one-on-one meeting, do we have any more supporting documents for the projected population growth? Because that was my only question then.
So again, that population growth is something that CMAP prepares, and we can provide I think it's called On to 2050, where CMAP provides the basis for their population calculation. So we can also put that on the website, or at least a link to that document, so.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the last discussion item is just, we do need to identify, the working group appointments, within the resolution that would be on the February 1st agenda. So, if we want to have that discussion tonight, or, have a discussion prior to, the first one, that'll need to be voted on.
Well, the mayor's gonna be our representative, correct?
Yes, that's correct. I should have clarified in this that what has been discussed with the other communities is that the mayor or village president of those communities will be the primary representative on the mayors and managers working group. So then the alternate would need to be another elected official, so one of you.
Don't all raise your hand at one time.
Okay.
Well, how would that work going forward? I mean, if we're changing out, after an election cycle, how would that work going forward?
Yeah, that'll be, the term that the Board of Commissioners will serve will be something that'll be identified within the IGA. So it'll be either timed with the election cycle or for a set time period.
I would suggest, I'm sure if somebody up here wants to do it, I would certainly support that, and if not, I'll be our go-to guy. We'll have somebody. It's one of our, I would say yes if I had to. I think, Councilman Mudger might say yes.
I would.
Okay, so we're gonna cover it, right? Right, Mayor?
Yes,
Okay,
I don't want somebody tonight, do you?
well, like I said, we will need to actually write a name into the resolution, so I will need to, have a name to put on there, so. But again, that doesn't have to be decided tonight. I will confer with the mayor, after in the next week or so to identify that.
Question, how often would you be meeting and where would you be meeting? In different towns or?
Right now, the group has been meeting monthly, and they've been meeting at the Village of Shorewood, their village hall. So, that hasn't, all those details is, it's been, I think currently it's been the third Thursday, or maybe the last Thursday of each month, so.
And do they have all their folks in place already?
As each community proceeds with approving the preliminary agreement, they'll be identifying those representatives.
Because I know, Shanahan's meeting tonight with their residents. So would they be picking someone tonight as well?
No, I don't think so. I think, so some of the communities are already going to be approving this next week, is the first community that I'm aware of that will be moving forward with presenting this, for approval. And then some of the other communities, then over the next, 4 weeks will be presenting this. But I don't believe Shanahan is going to be presenting this until February.
Well, I have no problem with putting my name in there as well. I mean, I might as well use all this knowledge you've given me for something.
Okay, and then, just for the municipal manager, administrative municipal management staff, what I would propose is the primary would be, typically the other communities are identifying their city manager, village administrator, and then their director is the alternate. So I would propose then that that for that component, we would put, Mr. Caparelli, and then myself as the alternate. And then for the technical advisory working group, I would propose that typically the director is being identified as the primary, so myself, and then the alternate would be another staff member, and I would propose Nick Gornick. Okay.
Sounds
do you
good.
need a formal vote on that, or?
It'll be voted on as part of the resolution approving the preliminary agreement. So we will, again, have all those names written into the resolution.
The only question I would have, Alice, and certainly you have a lot on your plate with this project, as well as the regular day-to-day operations. God forbid something happens that Mr. Caparelli has to be gone for a couple of weeks. Are you gonna be able, or a couple of months? Are you gonna be able to do both?
Yes, as I've already, over the past year, been doing both.
Okay.
And so I'd probably plan to attend even if Mr. Caparelli is attending. I think
Wanted to
I'd be
check.
attending as probably the program manager role. So I will be doing double duty anyway.
Okay,
So very committed to the project.
obviously.
I want you to know, Councilman, if Allison's gone for a couple of months, I'll cover for her as well.
You'll go to the technical end, right?
I thought you were suggesting what happens if I just didn't make it at all and I was no longer, I had, we were joking around earlier about what happens if I died in the next few years, so.
Jesus,
See, I didn't
wow.
want to be that dark.
That's not
I
really
know,
joking.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get that
Well,
dark.
Happy New
I
Year,
thought
for
that's what you were
heaven's
saying, so.
Jim, at least I didn't say, what if Mr. Camporelli dies? I didn't say that.
Okay,
Then I'll step in, okay?
There you go.
well, that's why we got all these alternates, so hopefully we're covered. Okay, are there any other questions? Otherwise, I'm gonna turn it over to Joe to talk about, money. Okay.
Thank you, Allison. And thank you all. My name is Joe Johnson. I'm with Stantec, one of the co-program managers for the program, so it's good to be back here with you. And as Allison said, now that we've kind of talked about the structure and the function of the commission, we want to talk a little bit again about how are we going to fund and finance this major undertaking, because that's a critical component and critically important, obviously, to you and to the residents of Joliet and the residents of the region. So Allison showed a map before that showed the general structure of the system as we expect it to be built. This is more of a schematic, but just to kind of understand, there are really three components to this system. The city of Chicago has existing water supply infrastructure. So they take water out of Lake Michigan, they treat it at the Sawyer Water Purification Plant, and then they convey it through a tunnel system to their Southwest pumping station. The Water Commission will construct, own, and operate infrastructure from that connection point all the way out to the Joliet region, to this area. And in fact, will construct and own all the infrastructure to get the water from Chicago to the delivery points for all of the commission members. So the commission will own and operate the bulk of that infrastructure. And then each community will continue to own and operate its own water distribution system, its storage facilities, pumps, and water mains. So there are those three different pieces, and that kind of plays into how the system is financed. When you look at the costs, we've broken this up into four buckets, if you will. The first three are all related to the regional portion of the program. There is the program management, design, and construction engineering to really design and implement the program here over the next few years. There's land acquisition and permitting for the regional system. Obviously, there's going to be right-of-way and permits required. And there's the construction of the regional infrastructure. So all three of those pieces are required to get the system in place. The program management, design, construction engineering, the land acquisition and permitting, that work will be managed by Joliet as the program manager for the commission. As Allison said, it was very important to Joliet to maintain control of the overall schedule and to make sure that we drive the program to completion by 2030. So Joliet, as the program manager, is holding the contracts for engineering, as well as will be working on the land acquisition and permitting to drive the project forward. The commission will reimburse Joliet based on relative capacity, so that at the end of the day, Joliet is only paying for its share of that work. But in the short term, during the program management, during the implementation and design, Joliet is really driving that, holding those contracts. As Allison said, the commission is expected to be formed in the first quarter, second quarter of 2023. At that point, we won't have started construction yet. So the construction contracts, which will be really the large dollar contracts associated with the work, will be held by the commission. The commission will put the bids out for consideration by contractors. Contractors will bid on it. Contracts will be selected, and the commission will hold those large contracts for the construction. So that does not have to get routed through Joliet. And the costs of those will be shared again across all the members based on their relative capacity of the system. And then finally, each community, Joliet, as well as the other communities that are going to be members, will have to make improvements in its own water system to switch over from a groundwater system to the Lake Michigan system. And obviously those costs are each borne by each community. So whatever Joliet has to do in its system for water main replacement, for new pump stations or storage facilities, Joliet pays for that. Each other member will incur those same costs and will handle that independently on their own. So that's an overview of how the costs break out here. What does that mean for Joliet as a Water Commission member? And when do these costs start to accrue? So this is a timeline, if you kind of look at cost categories in each row and then the timeline going across from left to right. The first costs that will begin to be incurred are related to commission administration. All the communities that are planning to participate have agreed to fund the commission from the time it's put into place, so that it has money to do the work that it needs to do as its own independent body, whether that's bringing on legal staff, financial support, setting up its accounting systems, then managing the construction contracts. So those costs will begin to be incurred actually this year in 2022. After the preliminary agreement is signed, each community that commits in will kick in some money to start to fund the commission administration costs. The next thing that will come up is starting to fund an operations and maintenance reserve. You can imagine this is a large system with a lot of infrastructure. When we turn the tap on in 2030, the commission needs to have some money in the bank to make sure it's got some reserve available to operate that system going forward. So again, the members have all agreed that they would begin to start funding based on their capacity, put money into the bank, if you will, beginning in 2025, that will start to build up that reserve. Beginning in 2026, we would expect the capital cost and debt service for construction will need to start being paid. So we're going to start accruing costs based on the construction contracts. We'll talk a little bit more about how those get distributed, but again, it's based on the declared demand. So we'd expect to start seeing the capital costs and the debt service start then. And then in 2030, when the water starts to flow, is when the cost for actually the purchase of water from Chicago, as well as the actual O&M costs, would start to be incurred. So it is a gradual buildup over time. The tools to fund this is not a project that can be funded based on cash. We don't have the cash on hand to do this. This is a major capital project. So we've identified over the past couple of years a number of funding tools that will help us borrow the money to do this and finance the project in a cost-effective way. We've talked about a number of these before, but WIFIA is the Water Infrastructure Financing and Innovation Act is a federal program managed by the US EPA that is specifically geared to providing low interest and flexible repayment terms for large capital projects like this. So it's a very good fit. The State Revolving Fund Program is another low interest loan program that's managed by the state. So the Illinois EPA manages this. And the SRF program has been widely used by Joliet in the past for other infrastructure projects, but it also provides low interest funding. And then revenue bonds are a traditional funding vehicle for municipalities that would be used to make up the difference. So one of the challenges for the team is starting to think about what is our funding strategy? How are we best going to use these tools to manage the costs of the overall program? Some of the key principles for our funding strategy are we have to have the capital to meet the schedule. We have to get the project built by 2030, so that's important. We want to make sure we secure the lowest cost of capital. We want to keep the borrowing costs down so that the majority of the money that we're spending is going into the infrastructure that we're actually building. We wanted to make sure as we planned this, that we used funding terms that weren't going to discourage participation by other members. We wanted to make sure we're actually trying to encourage other people to participate. And the bottom line is we need to make sure that we're mitigating the cost impacts on Joliet customers. So the idea is to keep the overall cost of water from the commission to Joliet down so that the costs then charged to Joliet residents can be managed as well. We've come up with a strategy that we think does this well. It funds the program and it manages the water rate increases. So this is just an illustration of how the debt will accumulate as the project is implemented. So obviously we're in 2022 right now. We're doing engineering and some of the preliminary land acquisition. As we go through the next few years, those costs will start to increase. And then you see the big jump as we get into 2025, 26, 27, as the construction contracts are let and we're having to fund the construction of the program. As the program's completed in 2030, we're peaking out that's at the point where the debt is the maximum, and then we pay that debt back over time. It's not different from how you would finance buying a home or a major capital improvement, at that level as well. What's important here, though, what impacts the rates is how does that debt get paid back? And this is where there's some room for creativity here. Colors may be a little bit hard to see in this graphic, but this illustration shows the blue bars, the lighter and darker blue bars, are associated with the state revolving fund loans. The orange or reddish bars are associated with revenue bonds. And then the green is associated with the WIFIA program. And what's been done here, what the financial team has done is they've looked at how to sculpt, is the word that they use, sculpt the debt repayment so that we can manage it over time. And really the goal is to manage the near-term impacts on water rates. So what they've been able to do with SRF and revenue bonds, typically the payback period on those bonds is fixed at about 20 years. So we're limited in our flexibility there. So once we start taking those borrowing money through those vehicles, we have to pay it back. And that's why you see those start getting paid back pretty early, and then they're paid off within about 20 years. The WIFIA program provides a tremendous amount of flexibility in terms of repayment. And so the current strategy that's been prepared involves basically paying interest only on the WIFIA debt out until about 2050, and then starting to pay off the principal on the WIFIA debt after the other borrowing vehicles have been paid off. What that allows us to do is stretch the cost of repaying the program out over a period of time, and that has a direct impact on water rates in the near term. So there's a lot of refinement. This is not finalized. Obviously, details will be developed further as we go into getting the costs from updating the costs and starting to look at also monitoring the market in terms of interest rates. Right now, interest rates are very low, and there's a big push on the part of the team to get the first WIFIA loan in place and lock those interest rates in, because once they're locked in for the duration of that loan. So, but this does give the general overview of the strategy that's been developed, really, as I said, to mitigate the cost impacts on ratepayers.
But later on down the road, as if other communities decide to join in to the program, the overall cost will be able to pay this down sooner, right? It's more folks, if they decide, other communities decide, if all of a sudden Yorkville at some point decides they want to jump in, which is great, and they're more than welcome, but I mean, we'll be able to pay some of this stuff down a little bit sooner, and it'll lower the rate for everyone. Is that correct?
There are a couple of pieces of that. So
Right.
certainly, all of these borrowing vehicles allow us to repay the debt back sooner. So if there's money available to pay it back sooner, absolutely, we can do that, and that doesn't create problems. I think getting back to one of the things that Allison described, right now, the way the parties have talked about the commission is that we're adding up the maximum day demand of the parties that are going to join the commission, and the system is going to be sized for that. There is definitely there are provisions in the plan for expansion, but certainly that would have to be a commission-wide decision. If somebody decides to come in later on and there would have to be a significant adjustment to the capacity of the system to take on a new user, that would be something that would be discussed at the commission level. But definitely there has been consideration given to how we finance this now, and then what happens when expansion is required. And obviously, there are economies of scale, so the more that we can bring in, it does help us keep the cost down. Great. So just some notes on the funding strategy, and we'll talk a little bit about 2022 here in a minute, but our key goals right now in the short term to get the program up and running, we're using some of the cash reserves that Joliet has, as well as some short-term borrowing vehicles to fund the work that's going to be going on this year. We're hoping to close on the first WIFIA loan here in the first quarter of this year. That will set that up and allow us then to start to draw money out of the WIFIA fund. We're working on the project plan for the state revolving fund. We've met multiple times with the Illinois EPA to make them aware of the program, and they really want to see, okay, when do we need the money? What's that drawdown going to look like? So we're laying that out for them. And then the financial team is looking at the overall picture and figuring out where would revenue bonds have to be issued to balance that out and fund the overall program. The last thing I want to make sure people understand is the advocacy team that was so instrumental in getting the legislation passed is also working very hard to keep their eyes out at the federal and state level for infrastructure funding. Obviously, this has been a point of much discussion all over the country right now, so we're really staying tuned to what are the opportunities there. If there are opportunities for external funding that we can bring in to help drive the cost of the program down, certainly we're out there trying to identify those as well. So there are a couple of key milestones in 2022 that will be coming up. The first thing is in the first quarter of this year, we'll be coming to the council with the ordinance to support what's called a bond anticipation note in the amount of about $59 million. This is short-term borrowings. A ban or a bond anticipation note is often used to kind of kickstart a project, but short-term borrowing that would fund a significant portion of the alternative water source program design, land acquisition, and program management, as well as the 2022 water main replacement program that the city is undertaking. So that gets that in motion. And as I mentioned, the goal is to close on the first WIFIA loan in the first quarter as well. That provides that flexible funding. And the WIFIA loan that's currently being developed will provide funding for the water main replacement program all the way through 2030. So it establishes the funding source for that replacement program, not just for 1 year, but for years all the way through 2030, as well as the balance of the alternative water source program design, land acquisition, and program management. So we get that in place. And then once that's in place, as the commission is formed, then the commission will use these same vehicles to start to position for borrowing for the construction costs. So there are some activities coming up in this year that we'll be moving forward with. The end point, or where these rates really kind of affect our customers and the residents of Joliet, have to do with the water rates. And so Joliet has to have rates in place, and the same is true of all the other members, to support their share of the program costs. Joliet's currently in the third year of the current water rate structure system. Typically, the city approves rates in a 3-year cycle. So rates will have to be approved again later this year, and they'll need to consider some of the costs of this program. So that rate development process that the city will be going through this year will have to look at how are we going to meet those financial needs and still keep water affordable within the community. A key part of that will be updating some of the construction cost estimates. As Allison mentioned, when we did the alternative evaluation last year, we developed costs for the 2 alternatives. Now, as we're dialing in on who the members are, exactly where we have to take the water, how much water are they requiring, we'll be able to update those costs and feed that into that rate analysis process this year so that those can be addressed as the team, as the rate consultant looks at the water rate process. I did want to take just a minute, and I think you are probably familiar with this, but the current rate structure for Joliet that's in place, the water rate structure, has a couple of key components. Customers pay water rates based on their customer class, which defines whether it's a commercial customer, industrial, or various types of residential, single-family or multifamily homes. And then there's also a tier to the rate structure, if you will. So the first 200 cubic feet of water per month that a customer uses is billed at a relatively low rate. And then once you exceed that first 200 cubic feet, and that works out to about 50 gallons per day per customer. Once you exceed that, then there is a higher rate that's charged for the balance of the water that you use in that month. This is a common structure used in water utilities, really to promote conservation and effective use, and also to benefit people that may be just single individuals, perhaps seniors in a house by themselves where they don't use a lot of water. It allows that rate to be kept relatively low, whereas as someone who uses a lot of water pays a higher price for that water above that baseline part of the rate. There is also then a daily fixed charge that's added into each water bill each month that helps cover the fixed costs of the water system. So that rate structure is what's currently in place, and it's what will be reviewed this year. And the consultant will take some of the updated costs, run some scenarios. There'll be dialogue with the council to kind of bring information back, get your questions, answer those, and eventually work towards development and adoption of new rates, probably they have to be in place by November 1 of this year, so that would be in the third quarter. Just, I guess, a quick fact based on the 2020 billing to see how is the current rate structure, how does it work within Joliet. The pie chart on the left is basically the distribution of the amount of water that's used. The pie chart on the right has to do with how much is paid for the water. So the easy way to kind of look at it is that large blue piece of the pie is the residential water use. So currently residential customers use about 64% of the water in Joliet. And then looking at the right side, they pay about 59% of the cost of all the water, generate about 59% of the payments for water. The non-residential users currently use about 29% of the water in the system and pay about 36%. And that's because of the way the rates are currently structured. There are some lower rates provided in the current structure for seniors and for single-family homeowners. And so that tips the scale just a little bit from the residential to the non-residential side. But again, as the rate consultant goes through the analysis this year, we can bring back more of this type of information to you so you have that to look at as we consider how the rates will change. And that process really involves multiple steps. As I talked about, we're defining and updating the costs. The rate consultant will consider the funding strategy and how are those costs for the program and the water main replacement program going to be paid back. They'll look at different rate options, do some financial modeling, present results, and then we expect it'll be a bit of an iterative process. So definitely, we look forward to your input and your questions as we go through that overall effort. The last thing I want to touch on is we understand that there's a concern that water has to be affordable, right? Water is a critical component for all of our residents, all of our businesses. And so as we go through this process, we're continuing to focus on strategies that we can look at in terms of how do we manage affordability. One of the first things, the city has been very active for the past few years in trying to promote water conservation and get the information out. This is a direct thing that every water customer can do, right? Your water bill depends to some degree on how much water you use. So if you're efficient in how you use your water, that has a direct impact on your bill. We, the program team responsible for the alternative water source program, our side of the bargain is we have to do everything we can to manage the cost of this program. So we control the capital and O&M costs and look for external funding that brings the cost of the program down. We're continuing to work with the city to leverage external sources of assistance. So right now, in the short term, there's a low-interest household water assistance program that's being managed out of Will County that can provide assistance to homeowners or residents that are having trouble paying their water bill. And we'll be looking at what are the other options available out there to make sure that we're leveraging those and making residents aware of the support that they can receive. And then the last piece is really this evaluation of the water rate structure that'll be going on this year and then again in about 3 years to figure out how do we adjust the water rates to make sure that we're funding the program but doing it in an affordable way. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the funding or financial part of the program before we move on. All right, hearing none, we'll move ahead and I'll let Teresa come up and talk about 2021 accomplishments.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name's Teresa O'Grady. I'm with Crawford, Murphy & Tilley, one of the program managers, along with Joe on the Alternative Water Source Program. So I get to talk to you about all the great stuff we've done in the past year, and it's been a busy year. You've seen a kind of hint of that with all the stuff that Allison and Joe have talked about over the last however many minutes. But it's been busy. So the program team has been hard at work over the last year since the city selected the new alternative water source. And when I talk about project team or program team, it's not only the engineering side, which is Stantec, CMT, EEI, Strand, V3, but it's also some of those other firms working on the program directly with the city and for the city, including legal assistance from Barb Adams, the Governmental Advocacy folks, and then several different financing, funding, and rate specialists that have been working on this. So it really does take a team, and of course led by Allison Swisher. So there's been major accomplishments over the past year, and I just want to go through them. We've talked about a number of them. Very first thing was signing the preliminary agreement with City of Chicago for water supply. Then obtaining the Lake Michigan allocation permit. Again, another major accomplishment. We couldn't get water from the City of Chicago without having a Lake Michigan allocation permit. Next, we obtained the unanimous approval of the Water Commission legislation and veto session. Again, a big accomplishment on many different fronts, but it allows then us to have the Water Commission formation and allow all the regional partners and Joliet to save money on economies of scale. So again, big accomplishment. We've spent a lot of time in the past year many folks within the city, regional partners, program team, building those relationships and collaborating with the regional partners to set the stage for the formation of the Water Commission. So again, major accomplishments. There's been other accomplishments in specific areas that I'll go through in the next few slides with regards to engineering, legal, governmental advocacy, and financing. So as Allison had mentioned, 2021, we began the preliminary engineering and design of improvements. The infrastructure that Joe has shown from Chicago to Joliet, preliminary engineering has begun on those components. So we've focused on the Chicago connection facilities at 84th and Kedvale that we've talked about before. Looking at transmission main alignment from Chicago to the region. Looking at hydraulics along the transmission main. Again, preliminary engineering activities that were done in 2021. We've also been trying to set the stage for the overall program, and that allows us to move forward with goals in mind. So one of those things that we did establish was the DBE and local engagement strategy. Again, a program strategy and goal that was put together. Also the sustainability and resilient design strategy. We want to make sure that it meets the vision and the mission that has been established to be sustainable. And also lead solubility testing was performed as a first step as part of the water source transfer plan. And again, this is required to make sure that once the switch does happen, it is safe. And so we are doing that testing early to make sure that we have a plan in place for the switch. From the legal side of it, we've relied on Barb Adams, Special Legal Counsel, who's been providing assistance on all those major accomplishments that we've talked about, from the Water Commission formation efforts and developing the preliminary agreement and key principles, the approval of the Water Commission legislation, as well as obtaining the Lake Michigan allocation. In addition, in 2021, we did advance the negotiations with City of Chicago for the final water supply agreement. That will continue, as was mentioned previously, into 2022, but we have made efforts in that regards. Next, governmental advocacy. The governmental advocacy focus has been on educating local, state, and federal officials on, first of all, the need. Why Joliet needs, and the region needs, a new water source, but then also gaining support for the Water Commission legislation, as well as obtaining support for grant funding. And specifically, the one thing I wanted to mention is that the governmental advocacy team, they were able to insert language into the infrastructure bill that ensures that grants can be used to fund the formation of regional partnerships to collaboratively address documented water shortages. And this was an accomplishment we feel that was great that the advocacy team was able to make. So lastly, all those grants and everything that the governmental advocacy folks are trying to get for the program ties into the financial, which Joe talked about a little bit. Updating funding strategies in order to optimize the funding of the program, to reduce program costs, to enhance affordability. And as Allison had mentioned, part of that was completing the cost of service audit for City of Chicago rates, and that was great. We were able to recognize some reduced purchased water costs there. Also, Joe talked about developing that financial framework for the Water Commission. Again, really drilling down into those costs, not only for Joliet, but the regional partners. And then, of course, obtaining funding for the program is key. And the team was able to submit that first WIFIA loan application that will be closed here in the next couple months. So with that, I do look forward to giving a similar set of accomplishments next year, but I feel the team has done a great job in the last year in advancing the program and everything that has happened around Water Commission formation efforts. Any questions?
Nice job, thank you.
Thank you.
On the infrastructure bill that was passed, I know
Yes.
they're finalizing it in Washington.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea? The way I look at it is, we need $1 billion for our regional project. That's 0.1% of their 1 trillion. It's not a lot of money, and I'm sure the population of the region we're gonna serve is probably 0.2% of the country's population. You see where I'm going with
Yep.
this? Do we have any feeling or idea of what they're,
Yeah, we are working with the governmental advocacy folks and trying to, the way that infrastructure bill is being funded, primarily right now is through, SRF. And we're working with the advocacy folks, to enable the SRF funding, to be utilized more fully for this program. And I would say stay tuned. There will be, more happening this year in that regards, in trying to get the most money we can out of that infrastructure funding.
and we have our senators and our congressional representatives involved?
Absolutely.
And money can be earmarked from that bill, unlike in the past, so.
Yes.
Okay, and I would assume, we can't guarantee, but it should be no secret to anybody who's paying attention, water is critical, becoming more critical with each passing year. There's gotta be programs that'll come later, which we can apply financially, right, Jim? If we get a $100 million, grant in 4.5 years because of some special program that comes out of Washington or out of, probably Washington, not necessarily out of Springfield, we can apply that. You talked about outside, revenue sources and readjusting, which would allow us to adjust our rates too, if we could cut those costs.
Yeah, I mean, we'll continue to look for all the funding we can, not only for Joliet infrastructure, but for the regional water commission effort. And that's a primary task of the governmental advocacy folks.
Thank you.
And I would simply add, no one knows what's gonna happen, but going back to the very beginning, Allison, that we took a regional approach, I think improves our chances of getting money, because it's not just for our city, it's gonna be for people all throughout the region, so.
Absolutely.
We'll see what happens, but thank you.
And that's a good point. I think this is a good time to remind people, because we've been doing this for nearly 4 years now?
At least, yeah.
I mean, really rolling up our sleeves. It was preliminary before that. And people may have lost this message along the way. This is not an option. This is not a choice for the city of Joliet. One way or the other, we have to do this by 2030, when our peak demand will no longer be met. And in short shrift after that, our daily demand, in other words, we can go completely dry at some point in the next decade. Completely dry. We can't let that happen. So we're gonna do this whether we have 7 partners, and I'm glad we do.
Yep.
It's to be less expensive, because then we'll pare it back, just to meet our needs. The partners understand that. If we do that and we only put in, instead of 66-inch pipe, we put in 48-inch pipe, then they can't come on later on unless they put new pipe in. So it's gotta happen no matter what, and I think the partnership with the other 7 communities, having 8 people involved, is a good indication. And it's not gonna get any better, or in any better supply, the water's not, it's gonna get worse.
Yeah, as you kick the can down the road, it only gets more expensive. So that's been part of the conversation with the regional partners, and why there is interest with the regional partners.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
All right, so I'll be brief to wrap up, but I really am excited about moving forward with 2022. There's been so much work that's been going on and so much more to happen, but it's a really exciting program, and just want to highlight some of our goals for 2022. So as far as the regional coordination, we've been talking about the approval of this preliminary agreement, which again will be on the council agenda for February 1st. And then we'll be coordinating with these advisory groups moving forward over the next year to finalize those documents related to the Water Commission formation. And I just wanted to take a moment to point out that we kicked off this regional initiative in 2018, and I know at that time, some others had informed us, and specifically Mayor Odekirk, that there was no way that we were gonna be able to do this in this time frame. And I am, here today to say that we are doing this. We are forming a water commission. We are going to be, serving this region with a new water source. And I think that it just speaks volumes to the support that the program team has had from all of the elected officials within Joliet as well as the region. So we have great partners that we're working with and very excited to move forward with forming this water commission.
Elsa, if I can add,
Yeah.
you're right about that. Some of the senior political people in this region were scoffing at this idea. And I remember pulled me aside after one of our presentations and thought it was laughable that we could do this by 2030. So
Yeah,
kudos to you and to our team for doing this.
And in talking with some of the other elected officials, they had found some documents from the 80s where they had been approached by Joliet to seek, an alternative water source at that time. And, lo and behold, almost, 30 years later, we're actually doing it. So I know this idea has, started and stopped a number of times, but, I'm completely confident that this time, it's going to happen.
What I would add, yourself, your team, both internally as well as the consultants, all the members of this council, the mayor, members of the other, partner communities. Yeah, there's pushback. You take a little slack because, the rate's gonna go up.
Yep.
Here's a secret to the public, even without this necessary capital improvement, because we're gonna run out of water, right? Rates are still gonna go up. I pay more for my insurance this year than I did 5 years ago. I mean, it's just normal. But this is huge. This is monumental, and it's a legacy project that, Pat, you said earlier, well, that's gonna be long beyond my time. Remember you said that? Mine too. Almost everybody up here by the time we really play this out over 50 to 100 years. But people can look back and say, I don't remember who those people were. They took some flack. Everybody involved. Dozens of people did the right thing.
Yes. So the engineering, again, we're going to move forward with completing the preliminary design of the capital improvement programs that I showed previously, and then we'll proceed into the final design. For the funding side, as Joe had shown on the slide, there's going to be actions taken for the short-term borrowing, the ban, as well as the WIFIA loan closing. And then also this summer, the commission will be submitting a letter of interest to WIFIA. Again, the commission will be funding the construction project. So we've talked to US EPA and they've assured us that the funding is there. We just need to apply for it as the commission. From the legal side, we'll be moving forward with finalizing the negotiations related to the Chicago water supply agreement, which we anticipate bringing to the council in late spring, early summer, and then working on the development of the commission documents. Again, there's going to be the IGA, there's going to be the water supply agreement, there's going to be the program management agreement between Joliet and the commission. So a lot of work still to do yet to formally form the commission. And then again, on governmental advocacy, we want to promote expanded access to SRF funds. A lot of the money from the infrastructure bill is being funneled into SRF, so we need to make sure that Joliet is positioned to receive that. Joliet and the commission is prepared to receive that. And then also developing all possible alternatives for external funding. So just a little bit more detailed schedule. Beyond 2022, in 2023, we'll have the commission formation. Then we would initiate the SRF loan application process, continue on with preliminary and final design, and then also land acquisition and easement acquisition. In 2024, we anticipate the WIFIA loan for the commission would close, ongoing design efforts, and we would begin construction probably in the fall of 2024 at that Chicago connection site. Then 2025 to 2030 is when we have the heavy construction going on, the commissioning and the startup of the system, the transfer of the water source, and then a final audit of the Chicago cost of service analysis in 2029. And throughout the entire program, we are always going to continue to emphasize the ongoing public education and outreach, because this program will only be successful if we communicate well with all the impacted residents about all the different steps as we move forward. So again, big picture goal. We're going to deliver Lake Michigan water to this region by 2030. We're going to do it working with our regional partners. And just want to make sure everyone can stay informed along the way. Sign up for our mailing list. You can do that at our website, rethinkwaterjoliet.org. There you can learn more, sign up for eBlast, attend our stakeholder meetings, which are held quarterly, and really just help spread the word with all your neighbors. So with that, that concludes our presentation. If there's any final questions, I can answer them.
Thank you, Allison. Good job
Okay.
again. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, there's public comment section. Is there anyone who wishes to make a public comment? Hearing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second? Thank you. Hold on, wait, sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.